So before this video starts, I just want to let you know I was just editing it and I didn't realize I have a new microphone. It's the second time I've used it, and I don't know how it happened, but the echo was on. So there's an echo when I'm talking. It seems to not be as bad as it goes on, but I just wanted to let you know I'm aware of it. I'm sorry, and that won't happen again. Okay, so here you go. Hey everyone, today I am sitting down and we're going to talk about something that came across my feed. And sorry, I'm dealing with a little cold here. I have my warm tea. We actually are having in Minnesota a cold day, and schools are closed, and it's like I think it was like minus 17 this morning. So I decided to sit down and finally do this. I've been meaning to for quite a while, well, a couple weeks, once it came across my feed. But just a little backstory on me, if you are new here, never seen me before, or don't know why I'm talking about this, and I never thought that this would be part of my channel. But alas, because of things that I've gone through with my mom, this is now something that I'm pretty passionate about talking about and finding things out about, resources, anything I can, not only to help me, but to pass it on and help other people who may be going through the same thing or to not have to go through the same thing. I moved my mom into assisted living. Long story short, she had a litigation against my sister, but I didn't know I got her on medical assistance, and so now she's there, and I'm jumping through hoops through all that and just trying to figure that out. But I started to get interested in like elder abuse, any kind of elder abuse, but especially financial elder abuse. Because it's these people who take advantage of vulnerable people. And a lot of times what I've seen, and even on some videos that I posted, is that people blame the victims. And that's why a lot of people don't even tell their story, because they feel stupid, they feel like I should have known better, and that other people will think that it's basically their fault and they pretty much deserved what they got. And you know, there's romance scams, and it is not your fault. It is not your fault. That's why they do it to elders, because a lot of times elders don't know about, keep up with technology, and they trust people. And it's unfortunate because that is the generation that probably could trust people in the past, except for maybe a certain few. But now with the internet and trying to navigate that, when that came later in life, that it's something that they would never suspect. And you shouldn't have to, but people can be cruel. And so today, it came across, I was looking for something, and it came up, and the case actually was in Minnesota, and I started reading about it, and it's called the magazine scam. And they built more than $335 million from vulnerable elderly people. And so the guy who, they sued him in Minnesota, but there were 60 defendants in this case, because it didn't just have to do with him. A whole bunch of people from all over the country, and I think even outside the country, were involved in this scam, this magazine scam, it was called. The guy, his name is Russell Ram, R-A-H-M. He's 54, and he's from Olathe, Kansas. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, O-L-A-T-H-E. He was just sentenced to 10 years and $110 million restitution to the victims. So if I'm looking down here, it's because I have my computer here with everything I need to talk about because I can't memorize all this stuff. So I am going to read, it's the case profile, which kind of, it's just a paragraph that sums it up. So I'm going to put my glasses on here to read that. The prosecution of Ram stemmed from a 2016 lawsuit by the Minnesota Attorney General against a Fridley man who ran a Ram subsidiary. Because this Russell Ram, owned multiple companies, and a lot of them in Minnesota. The man was among 60 co-conspirators in what turned out to be the largest fraud conspiracy against elderly people in U.S. history. So this is the largest fraud conspiracy, largest elder abuse against people in U.S. history. Agents at call centers, mostly in Florida, phoned victims and followed scripts about an existing magazine subscription that supposedly was set to auto-renew. As many as 10 of the phony companies charged as much as $1,000 a month to victims' credit cards. About 183,000 victims were duped out of 335 million. All 60-some defendants, including Ram, pleaded guilty. So, do you know as a paralegal for over 40 years, how much evidence that they must have that they all pleaded guilty? Because people usually, if it's on a thin string, that they'll, try and defend themselves, but they must not have had much of a defense, and not one of them, which I find intriguing and sad all at the same time. So I'm also going to read this part because it's him being sentenced and the audacity for him to ask for home confinement, but you'll find out here. So the mastermind of a massive telemarketing scheme that bilked pensioners out of $335 million for phony magazine subscriptions is going to prison. Russell Ram, and he's only 54. I mean, I'm 59. 54 is pretty young. Of Olathe, Kansas, was sentenced to 10 years. I think that's still too short. Ram also is ordered to pay $110 million restitution to victims. And listen, victims usually don't see anything even close to that. The money is usually all spent, or they'll sell stuff and they'll get like pennies on the dollar for what they lost. The sentence was issued by Minnesota-based federal judge John Tunheim, despite a plea from Ram's attorney for home confinement because he's paralyzed from a 2019 stroke. Well, I'm sure the stress of stealing and trying to cover all that up, I don't know, but I would assume that's very stressful, and to have a stroke. The judge said no, calling Ram the most prominent of 60 co-conspirators in the scheme that ran 20-some years. So this ran for over 20 years. The prison sentence rejected a statement from a former federal prisons official supporting home confinement, noting the possibility of Ram being abused in prison because his post-stroke incapacitation. So I know this isn't part of the case, but I'd love to hear what you think, because I think sometimes when you're empathetic that, him being paralyzed, that you can see, somebody who's paralyzed probably does not belong in prison, but it's kind of this turnaround that he's saying that he would be a victim, but yet he has over multiple hundreds of victims that he stole over $335 million from. Well, him and his co-conspirators. So, hard to feel sorry for him. Kind of think that maybe karma came around, and that's what happened. So, I don't know. It's kind of a catch-22 with that, but again, hard to feel sorry for him. For what he's done to other people. And the chief federal prosecutor, Harry Jacobs, said Ram made himself rich by perpetrating the fraud. Jacobs said that Ram lived in a fancy house, drove expensive cars, had a luxury vacation home on Lake of the Ozarks, where he raced power boats, and had all the trappings of wealth, all of which was built on proceeds of this fraud scheme. And it's funny, when I went to Google him and looked at images, and that's what it said, like him racing power boats and stuff like that. And I can't imagine how much these power boats that you race can cost. So Ram, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud in 2022. According to his plea, the conspiracy lasted roughly 2 decades. So this has been going on for a long time without him being caught. Dating from 2000 until February 2020, he managed 2 magazine subscription companies in Shawnee, Kansas. Ram admitted that those and other companies linked to the conspiracy used fraudulent sales scripts and pitches to dupe victims into paying for expensive and at times duplicative subscriptions through a series of lies or misrepresentations. So the United States Attorney's Office from the District of Minnesota actually has a website that I will link below, and it's magazine scam victim information, and it also shows, if you believe that you've been a victim of this crime, that there's a place that you can get in touch with them so that you can get on the list of victims to hopefully get some sort of refund. I'm sure once they go through all the defendant stuff and see what they could get. So this is how the fraud worked. The defendants carried out their telemarketing fraud scheme by calling victim consumers who had 1 or more existing magazine subscriptions and offering to reduce the cost of an existing magazine subscription. The defendants were lying. In reality, they were not calling from the victim consumers' magazine companies, and they were not calling to reduce the cost of an existing subscription. Now, isn't that a slap in the face to say that they were calling from the victim's consumers department, yet they were actually the one defrauding them? I mean, the kahunas on some people. Instead, the defendants were tricking the victims into signing up for entirely new magazine subscriptions, which they did not want and often could not afford. This resulted in many victims being billed by several, even dozens of magazine companies every month. Some victims were scammed out of hundreds or thousands of dollars. Other so-called mega victims were scammed out of $50,000 or more. Some defendants would call victim consumers, including mega victims, claiming they were calling from the cancellation department. The defendants would offer to cancel the magazines the victims were receiving and pay off money the victims were owed in exchange for a large payment, often of $199 or $507. The defendants were lying. They were not calling from a cancellation department, and they were not canceling any existing subscriptions or paying off any money owed. In reality, they were simply stealing the money from the victims. So again, I am going to leave this link below, and you can get all the information if you think, or even if you're just interested in reading about it. I think it lists all the defendants too, and it lists cases against the defendants, because a lot of them are in different states. But it says too, can I get my money back? And it pretty much says what I said, that they're getting the assets, trying to sell those off, getting the money back that they can, but a lot of it is gone, and so the restitution may be just a portion, again, probably pennies on the dollar, but at least it's something to get back. And as I was doing my research for this, article from AARP came up, and it says how to avoid magazine subscription scams. This is from March 30th of 2023, and it references this case, so I'm sure this is big, and I don't remember ever hearing about it, and they're just being sentenced now, but it looks like it had been going on for 2 decades, but they had caught them, I think, in 2022, something like that, 2020. So they give tips on how to avoid these scams. First of all, they talk about how the scams work, because it's not just calling. Mail. A subscription offer sent by mail may resemble renewal notice or bill, use words such as publisher or billing or service, and appear to be from a magazine company. But if you look at the fine print, they're actually selling you a new subscription, usually for 2 or 3 times the cost. Door-to-door sales. People with compelling stories. Oh, this has happened. It hasn't happened in a long time, but remember the day that young kids would come trying to sell you stuff? Sell high-price subscriptions this way, and oftentimes you will not get what you paid for. Telemarketing calls. Callers pretending to be from magazine companies deceive consumers into paying for expensive multi-year packages. They say that you've won a big prize and you are entitled to bonus magazines or a lower payment, but you have to provide personal and financial information and participate in a tape-recorded order verification. But the scammers will change the recording or the offer's terms when you don't get what's promised, and they will use the recording to force you to pay. Oh, wow. Never heard of that before, but wow, they've come a long way. It goes on to say, if you do subscribe through a fraudulent seller, you could find yourself charged more for a subscription than the publisher's going rate. Fly-by-night operators take your money and you never receive magazines, or you may receive the periodicals but be billed for things you never asked for or wanted. Identity theft protection, for example, a roadside assistance plan. And the article offers the smart way to subscribe. If you want to subscribe to a magazine or periodical, contact the publisher directly or subscribe through the magazine's website. And here are some tips. Ignore the hard sell. Don't take the call. Don't look at the email, text, whatever medium you may be contacted by. Because we all know that a lot of times it's called phishing, and that's when they send emails like that. Or my mom, she calls me all the time. I just went and looked at her computer on Saturday, because this happens to my mom a lot. Like they say, oh, you owe this, and a lot of it is like the subscription renewals for like the antivirus, and they're pop-ups. And I said, just ignore it. You really don't have to pay it. But she doesn't know, and she gets scared that her computer isn't going to be covered. And I can see not knowing and then just wanting to pay it. And so I've had to tell her multiple times, because I get it, even though I say it's just a scam, that she's scared that her computer is not covered. And so just know it's happening in my own family. So it's not just people who you think, again, I think a lot of people blame these people, but you don't know, and it is scary. Use a credit card if you do decide to subscribe. Then you'll be able to refute the charges later if necessary. And if you have been defrauded, report it to the FTC at ReportFraud.ftc.gov, and I'll leave that below. Importantly, alert the magazine too, since publishers care about this. It is in their interest not to have their customers ripped off and not to have themselves impersonated. So just know, if you have been a victim of this, there's a reason why you're called the victim. It's nothing you did wrong. You aren't stupid. You weren't careless. You just don't know that you trusted people. And trusting people is not being stupid. But it's sad that we can't trust anybody, and we don't know who to trust anymore. So, yeah, I just wanted to, sorry that I'm sick, my nose is stuffed up. But I just wanted to get this information out there because, yeah, it's the largest fraud scheme in the United States history. So I wanted to talk about it. And I remember back in the day signing up for, what was it? Like, you used to get tapes or something like that. I mean, this is way back in the day, before the internet. And they sent those little postcards for renewal. And I had moved from where I had first ordered it, and this actually happened to me. And so I don't know who filled it out, or maybe somebody else did, but somebody else was getting stuff, or again, maybe it was fraudulent that they got my information and said they were sending me stuff, but I kept getting billed. And listen, I worked at a pretty big law firm at the time, and I was just fortunate enough that I could have an attorney send something to them on letterhead. And because they had no phone number, which they usually don't, because they don't want your calls. They know you're going to call them and say you're being overbilled, so they don't want you to get to contact them. And I think they had like a P.O. box or address or something, and finally it quit once I said something on letterhead. But most people aren't that fortunate to be working at a law firm to be able to deal with it. And once you're in it, it's hard to get out of it, because they're fraudsters, and that's how they make it. They make it that it's hard to do it. So if you have, I'm going to leave everything that I have referenced today down below. If you're a victim, you can find out where to write them to let them know if you've been a victim before, but not necessarily of the magazine scam. Like I said, you can do the report fraud at ftc.gov. Leave that below. Leave the AARP article below. All that stuff that you can look up and research it for yourself. So, but again, be very careful. And if you are older and you're watching this and you don't know, all the younger kids, listen, I'm going to be 60. And one of the great tricks, always, because I almost fell for something. I had a Prime, and I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like it was coming up, and it looks so legit. Like, they make things look so legit now. This just happened to me just like 30 minutes ago, and I was actually paying some bills, and I was going to get my credit card out because it said mine had expired, which mine has expired since I last signed up for it. And then, so the key factor is always, if you get an email, and just always double check. Doesn't even, like, if it's something that you get every month, look at where the email is coming from, because the address was something like company UK or whatever. It had nothing to do with Amazon or Prime or whatever. And so that's always going to be a telltale sign. And make sure, because sometimes they try and fool you, that it may be like the right name, but it's misspelled. And listen, a huge company or any company is not going to misspell their company name in their email address. So that's kind of a telltale sign to look for and check. But if you don't know, ask somebody, and ask them just to see if they think that it's legitimate or not. And that'll just save you a whole world of trouble sometimes. So, okay, I'm going to go finish my tea and, go to bed and get warm. So, all right, well, I hope these help. This is really, again, said something that I just want to keep sharing because I just think it's so important, and I think we've dropped the ball, and I just don't want people who are victims to not think that they should come forward and tell people, especially like romance scams. People feel so stupid. They lose their whole life savings and end up having to go back to work when they're 60, 70, 80 years old because somebody duped them out of the money. And it's tragic and it's awful, and some people are awful. So, but if we keep talking about it and give ways to hopefully avoid it, then maybe we can try and avoid it ourselves. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.